Welcome, everybody, to MAR Talks, Land Defending and Revolutionary Mothering, with our panelists, Symbia Barnaby and uh, Esteli Juarez, and potentially Nuskmata joining us when she can. My name is caregivers. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the founder of Moms Against Racism Canada. And I joined this space as a biracial, black, cisgender woman, neurodivergent, and a mom to three kiddos who are 11, 9, and 7. And my family and I, we are guests on the traditional unceded lands of the Lekwungen people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, actually in the area that used to be home to the Chilkowich tribe in a little sub area of what is now colonially referred to as Victoria, BC. And MAR, or Moms Against Racism, would like to honor the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities on whose lands we endeavor to walk lightly as we do this work across Turtle Island. And so it is with humble gratitude that we specifically raise our hands to the Songhees, Esquimalt, Wasanich, Cosim Sianu, Siok, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, Sinixt, and Knacks. Those people as our leadership benefits from the blessings of their territories. And it's our commitment in MAR to support Indigenous sovereignty and reciprocity and reconciliation with the guidance of the Indigenous communities that we're impacting. And so today, in honor of National Indigenous Peoples Day and Indigenous History Month, we're sitting down with a very powerful panel, having a conversation centering Indigenous voices and visions for justice, healing, and liberation. So, land defending and revolutionary mothering brings together a range of Indigenous perspectives on activism, anti-racism, and the deep sacred responsibility of mothering as caregivers of children and protectors of land, culture, and future generations. Today, we're going to explore themes of rematriation, reparations, reciprocity, and what it means to raise children in resistance. And this conversation will reflect on how land and children claim us just as we claim them, and how revolutionary mothering can be a site of both personal and collective transformation. So we're very happy that you can be here with us to listen, to reflect, and to be in relationship with Indigenous truths and teachings that call us into deeper responsibility and action. Welcome. So much gratitude for you all for sharing your time and wisdom with us this morning. I was really hoping that we could start with some introductions, and maybe Symbia, can I invite you to go first?
Sure. So most people that are on the call know me already. So my English name is Symbia Barnaby. My traditional feasted Haida name is Gugajang. I have both ancestry and belonging with the Mi'kmaq and the Haida Nation. I currently reside on the traditional unceded lands of the Coast-Squamish people, specifically the 9 tribes of Lachlan and Metlakatla, BC, what is colonially and currently referred to as the city of Prince Rupert in northwestern BC. I am solo parenting 6 children, ranging in ages from 11 to 23, 5 of which have some type of neurodevelopmental support need, ADD, ADHD, autism, all the lovely neurodevelopmental labels. My background's in nursing, and the sector that I've been working in for the last probably like 6 or 7 years now is in disability or inclusion advocacy, community inclusion. So I'm currently the Indigenous Practice Advisor for the Family Support Institute. I will be there. I'm their interim in that position for the next year and a half. I'm really liking it. And I'm all those nations that I've named the Mi'kmaq, the Haida, and the Tsimshian Nation. I have elders, community members that I'm responsible to and I answer to and I'm in relationship to. And super excited to be here. Yeah, I'm sure that there's like a zillion other things that I could share, but those are some of the main ones. I'm also a lover of making films and hopefully a podcast pretty soon. I've said that a zillion times. You know, I think that a lot of the work that we're doing is so amazing and needs to be recorded, shared with other people. Our voices need to be elevated, amplified, because that's such amazing, amazing work that we're doing. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Symbia. Your turn.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. My name is Esteli Juarez. I currently reside in the occupied and unceded territories of the Tiwa people, so-called Albuquerque, New Mexico, near the southern medicine line of the United States of America. Way far from where most of you are, where it's hot and the sky is blue and forever and always blue. It's a beautiful place, and I'm lucky to live here. I'm lucky to be welcomed here by the folks who live here and to be able to work and live in community here. I am a mother. I have 4 children that I brought to this earth and a couple extra that I get to be a part of raising. And that continues to grow every day. I come from a line of women that always said all the babies are our babies. Any kid that shows up on my porch is probably going to be mine as long as they want to be. My background is in community organizing. I grew up a community organizer. All of my elders are community organizers in my bloodline. And so I've spent my whole life on a front line somewhere. But my job is a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for 16 years now. I spent the last 9 of those years in the area of child welfare. So I represent kids and parents and some pueblos here in New Mexico. We have a different kind of political relationship with the government because pueblos here were granted their land through a Spanish land grant, and none of them ever signed a treaty with the government. There was a treaty that was signed between Mexico and the U.S. government, and that's how pueblos became pueblos here in the United States. But I get to work with a couple pueblos and represent them both in their tribal social services and also in their state side with the Indian Child Welfare Act. And here in New Mexico, we have something beautiful and fantastic called the Indian Family Protection Act, which is what we call the platinum standard of child welfare. And I was featured in a book. I have 2 essays in a book called Revolutionary Mothering, which some of you may have heard of. I know that that's part of the title here and kind of one of the questions that we're going to talk about. But that happened, I think 2013, the book came out. And so there's 2 essays in there. And revolutionary mothering is something that I've been talking about for a long time, both because of the way that I was raised and also because of the way that I do this thing and the way that I've been doing it for the last 20 years. My oldest kid turns 20 this year. But yeah, I think that's solid intro. It gives us a place to start.
This is more than solid. It's amazing. Fantastic. So I have a list of questions that I've come up with that I want to ask because there's so many things that I want to discuss. But if this morning is like any other time that Symbia and I get together, we might get to like one or two of these questions. So it's gonna where it's gonna go this morning. And I totally trust that we are going to talk about what needs to be talked about. So maybe I can start with you, Esteli, to share a little bit more about your journey into land defense and activism and how those roles have shaped and claimed you.
Ooh, I like the second part of that question, how they claim me. So I would say when I was looking over the questions, I would say that land defending is something that is in my bloodline. So my mother's family comes from Spain, and they came here in the 1500s to this area, and they settled here and they stayed. And they mixed with the people that were here, and they continued to carry on indigenous traditional ways of farming, and ranching and animal raising. And I spent a big portion of my childhood on a ranch, on the land with my grandparents and my uncles and aunts. And it was instilled in us very early, both from my grandmother and my grandfather, that land was something we were borrowing, right? We were borrowing that from the future, that the land should be protected, that it should be defended, that we should be careful who we sell land to if we're selling land. We should be careful to who we invite into community with us. We should be super careful what we put into the land, what we put into the water. And that comes with, right, a responsibility to defend, to show up places and to fight back when they want to mine, when they want to expand. My aunt actually was responsible. She was part of the Historical Society of the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado, and she was responsible for getting legislation passed that preserves that entire valley. So it's like hundreds and thousands of acres of land that cannot be further developed because of the historical significance of the land. And a lot of ways here in this occupied territory known as New Mexico, that has been the way we have been taught to preserve land the best, is to just stop anyone from being on it and stop anyone from accessing it. I think that the land here claimed me because every woman in my bloodline before me is somewhere in this land. My people are here. My people are the dirt. My people are the trees. My people are the water. My children have the benefit of playing in the river that their greats had got to play in, got to clean in, got to irrigate from. And so I think as much as I love this place, it loves me back. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and here because my parents met out there, even though they were both from here, at a very early age. So, as I stated before, all of my elders were organizers. So, I remember there was a big salmon fight in the late 80s, early 90s in Washington state about Indigenous people being able to access the rivers, being able to access salmon, and being able to carry on those traditional ways of knowing and being. And I remember being at those with my father at probably 4 or 5 years old. My first conscious, real land fight was in northern New Mexico after we had moved here. We moved here when I was 11. We moved to a pueblo up in northern New Mexico. And one of the things about land grants is that it didn't just give the land to certain peoples or to certain communities, but it also preserved communal areas for grazing, for farming, for foresting, for accessing firewood and those kinds of things. So there was a fight between the Bureau of Land Management, which we have in the United States, the BLM, and they kind of run all federal lands. People who lived in that area who were there for generations, who were descendants of land grants, not Pueblo land grants, different land grants that families were granted. I was probably about 11 in the back of a pickup truck fighting with the Bureau of Land Management about grazing rights and accessing firewood, and realizing then, right, that the land was something that belonged to everybody, right? That there should never, that no one's owning this, no matter what current colonial practices exist. Fundamentally, the land belongs to no one and it belongs to all of us. And if we care about the future, right, if we care about what happens next, and not just my children and not just their children, right, but the descendants I have that I will never know, and the ones who will probably never even know my name, that we have to preserve those ways of being so that those things can be protected so that they can have them. In my adult life, I've found myself all kinds of places. I've taken my kids to front lines to land defend. We usually go to a cabin somewhere where it snows for Christmas because we don't really do Christmas. So we go away somewhere. And a couple of years ago, there was a land fight out in Nevada, which I don't know how familiar you guys are with what's going on down here, but maybe Las Vegas, Nevada's Las Vegas. But Nevada has a really, because of when it was included as a territory, it has a really interesting relationship with the federal government and the Indigenous people that live there. And there's a lot of really weird stuff that happens there federally with the land that is accessible by Indigenous folks. And so there was a group of elders that were on a piece of land that they were trying to displace. And my kids and I canceled our little cabin and we got in our minivan and we drove the 16 hours to Winnemucca to be on a front line and to fight with the BIA, to train ourselves to machines and to make sure that at least in the time that we were there, that nothing would change for those elders, and that to do as much as we could to organize to ensure that that wouldn't happen. To me, it's always been really important to make sure that my children are aware of what is going on out in the world. I grew up in an environment that was heavily politicized my whole life. I spent much of my childhood places that traditionally children don't belong, which was a challenge. And so as a parent, I try to do my best to find a line for them, which allows them the chance, right? Here, the exposure to things that are out there, then the ability to figure out what their place is in that. What does that mean for them? Probably a decade ago, I stopped dragging them everywhere and started making it a little bit more optional, the places they want you. Do you guys want to come with me and do this? Do you want to engage in this? Are there other things that are more important to you, right? These are the things that are important to me. You are a different person. There may be other things that are more important to you. How can I at least give you the foundation and the skill set to be able to organize around the things that are most important to you?
Mhm.
And so I think, yeah, that's how I got here.
It's amazing. I love that. And I love to, you know, how you were saying just at the end there with our kids and helping them find their own place in this too, and how important that is as well. And it sounds like that even very experiential for you and how you grew up too, right? Awesome. Thank you so much. And Symbia, how about you? I will ask the question again. So just can you share a bit about your journey into land defense and activism, and then how those roles have shaped and claimed you?
Yeah. So mine's, I think, a little bit different, but it's so funny that Esteli and I had talked about this before about our dads, right? And about who our dads were to our people and who our dads were to us, and the weird relationship that we have, but also like how powerful it is to watch them doing the work that they're doing, right? So it's kind of a weird relationship with the land that I am currently on, right? So my mom left Eastern Canada and came here through trauma, right? So my mom had an older son who was taken through 60 scoop, and then the family that adopted him had moved this way because of CN. The dad worked for CN, so he ended up over this way. And then they said, do you want to come and watch your son go to kindergarten? And then my sister and I were just, just littles, 1 and 2 or something like that, or 2 and 3, just littles. And then he was going off to kindergarten, and her mother and the lady who adopted my brother kind of, I think, knew it was time for my mom to leave our father, and also was like, hey, this is a good for you to go and see your son off to kindergarten. And then so she left and she came this way, and then that's how we ended up over this way, right? So I don't have bloodline ties to. My mom married my dad when I was 6 years old, so I've been raised within the Haida culture since I was just a kid, and we're not on Haida Gwaii, right? We're on Tsimshian territory. So my dad was displaced because of trauma. His mom's common husband passed away in Haida Gwaii, and then he was non-Indigenous, and the only way for her to get help was for her to sign her Indigenous, her status away, her and my dad. So then they ended up off of Haida Gwaii and into Prince Rupert. My dad came into our lives when he was, I think, 41-ish. He was a little bit older than my mom. And he was a part of the Council of Haida Nation. So it's like they have their own bands for Masset and for Skidegate. And then they have a council that came together, joining all of the different regions to represent them. The intention of it was to go for title. They have been the only known Indigenous people to occupy Haida Gwaii, and they can show that they've been the only people, like the Haida people have been the only Indigenous people. And I remember my dad saying, this was the whole reason he started. 1 second. So he has been a part of the Council of High Nations since he was, 30s, 40 years old. And I've always watched him talk about, and he'd leave our community, go to Haida Gwaii because they'd have their House of Assembly and different meetings. And I would listen to him talking about it all the time, right? About what they were doing around forestry, around fishing rights and stuff like that. And watched him talk about being on the steps in Ottawa, talking about fishing rights and being one of the only Indigenous people in the 70s to be able to say that, and all these things, watching him do it and then be a part of the Council of High Nation for the longest time. And we just presented last year together, talking a little bit about Haida title. And I can't speak for myself, right? Because I haven't been a part of a nation. I've been a child of somebody. I don't speak for our nation, but I can tell you now that I am 42 years old, I've watched my dad since I was 6 years old be a part of Council of Head Nation. And we were having this conversation last year, because they just got title recognized by Canada and BC just last year, right? And then we were talking away. He said he joined the Council of High Nations specifically for land and title, and he thought when he was that age, well, this is going to happen within the next couple of years. And now he is 77 years old. So watching him and being a part of any kind of organizing that they've had for the Haida Nation here in Prince Rupert, we've been a part of it, right? My dad's been the rep for Prince Rupert my whole life, basically, on and off through elections. He's been one of the strongest voices. And he started to get me to MC. He was just like pushed me one day and was like, here, it's your turn. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, no, you need to learn how to do this. It was very nerve-wracking in the beginning, but then, it being up there and starting to learn, who's who about as much as I can around our clan system and about political things that are so when Esteli was talking about being political, born political by being people, it's just a part of everything we try to do just to live is political. So like I said, it's a little bit of a weird relationship with the land that I'm on right now, because it is Tsimshian land, right? My dad had his father's Tsimshian, his mother's Haida. His father, he never broke his father, right? So there's no claim to this land. But when you talk about how it shaped us and how it claimed us, I've been claimed. My ex-husband's Tsimshian, so my children have bloodline to Tsimshian, to this territory, which is really amazing. Their grandmother's one of the ones that helped to revitalize the language within the education system here. So every child learns Sim Alech in the school system through the whole school district, which is pretty damn cool. His mom and his aunt, so my children's great aunt, were the ones that helped to create the curriculum for people to learn Sim Alech in our community. And they actually pushed for us to be in the schools in the Strong Start, and then they have a course now. The courses, I think, plural, with the university to be able to speak the language, to teach it as part of the teacher program. But within the last 2 years, I would say 3 years maybe, I've just been claimed over and over and over and over again to do the work. We've had, I've had traditional helping teachings that were gifted to me within the last 10 years, following trauma that we went through. And then I've just been practicing out on the land with the people that taught me out on the land here. And we raised up our missing murdered Indigenous women, and that was an undertaking, to say the least, and a lot of learning about relationship, a lot of learning about whose traditional territory that we're on, learning about about protocol and about how to ask permission, how to ask for blessings, how to work alongside. Been I say this is like matriarch training right here. This is the quick and dirty. You want to learn how to stand tall in a feast hall, do this kind of work, and you get groomed like you wouldn't believe. And then we did a sacred fire last year, and then again this year. And we did one actually in solidarity for Nuskmata and the work that she's doing. And it was an uphill battle with our city because the traditional territory, so it's the Tsimshian people, they have 9 tribes that are actually active right now. They had 14 at one point in time, but they don't have people in those specific tribes. They've died out, kind of thing. And one tribe specifically is the one that I work alongside. Their matriarch just basically claimed me, and she was like, I'm going to put you to work, And so I've been doing stuff with the city, permits, and all the organizing in the background that people don't even realize that is there. And really, we don't need to do, but I have been doing. We don't have to ask permission to do a fire. But I chose to go and say, hey guys, to the fire department. And then it was a big, huge snowball and a huge undertaking with the city to show, hey, we have spiritual rights that we can practice this. And I was going to say no shade to the city, but I maybe because this is recorded, they know it already. And our meetings with them have been recorded too. But when we went to write to them they basically said they wanted us to do like a special events permit in order to be able to do this fire. And I was like, no. And then we had to show them a map of where we were going to be. And then they were just like, they gave us this list of like 10, 15 different things they wanted us to do. They wanted us to have a $2 million liability insurance. They wanted a $2,000 deposit for the land that we were going to use in case it got wrecked in any way, shape, or form, or damaged, or if garbage was left and they had to clean it. They wanted me and the other firekeeper to sign an agreement that we wouldn't abandon the fire at any point in time. They wanted us to have a burn barrel that they were going to put together and that they were the only ones allowed to put together and take apart, and then we had to pay for it. They wanted us in a field, which is in the neighboring tribe's territory, not on their tribal territory. They wanted us to sign that we were only able to burn specific type of wood. They wanted us to go door to door to the neighborhoods that were around there to warn them that there would be potentially noise throughout the night, because this fire was going to be 24 hours, right? As soon as we opened it, it was 8 days continuous that we opened it, right? So they wanted us going. And I was just like, we went to them, the firekeeper and I supported the family. So their matriarch, her son, her niece, who's like the next person in line after her son, and my dad, that lady, the matriarch's niece. We went together to City Hall and had a meeting with them, and we did our High Shaman protocol invite to them. We went in, they shared the way that we're meant to invite people, and it speaks to it. I can't speak to the whole entire process because it's like a thing. You have to be present in order to be able to experience it. But there's people crying because your spirit's moved. You're coming spirit to call their spirit to come, right? To come and witness the work. And then we sat down and I said, here's your list. And I said, this is what we're going to do instead. This is what we're going to do instead. This is what we're going to do instead. And I told them, I said, our teachings that come from a time that beyond record or memory of any kind of occupation will either meet or exceed anything that you're asking us to do. We have teams that already teach us how to conduct ourselves. We are not going to do these things. We ended up doing the liability insurance, and then, Mar was amazing about offering up a donation for us to be able to put a deposit for us to, which was really, really ridiculous. But we tried to do what we could to kind of work with them. And it was still really hard, and then we were on the land for those 8 days and it was amazing, amazing. My life is forever changed by the work that, so when you're talking about, I feel like I'm just going to cry the entire time. As soon as we all started talking, I was just like, like bringing us all together was already going to be enough. But talking about the things that we're doing. But yeah, it's shaped me. It's changed me forever, and bringing my babes to the missing and murdered Indigenous women totem pole raising. They were a part of, helping to prepare. They've always been and helping to prepare, just like we were. Just like today, I was showing the ladies before we were on here. I was down at the hall setting up. We have a Haida graduation for all the grads that live in Prince Rupert that are of Haida descent, and my kids are there, right? When we filmed our documentary, there's a section of it that they start talking about what they've known to be true and what they've witnessed. And I just rewatched it. I went to go see Nuskmata in Belcoola a couple of weeks ago, and we watched the documentary because they had a documentary or a film festival, and they showed our documentary. And I was like crying through it because I was like, I forgot. I forgot about these pieces. I forgot how far we've come even from then to now, right? And just like Esteli said, it's like you bring them, everywhere. I have this picture of my son. He's like 2 years old when this is how tired I am, and how much Enbridge, when Enbridge was trying to come through, right? I have this sign, and it's like it's a line from the Lorax. But he has it on because the Lorax, when he was 2 years old, was like his favorite film, right? And it was talking about the trees. So he has this sign, and I was like, yeah, these kids have been at it for how long? And then around the corner from here, not really, but like 3 hours away from here. The firekeeper is Giksen. He's one of my really good friends, and it's brought me to work to there too. So they have currently PGRT. I don't know if anybody's watching stuff in BC happening, but makes me want to cry. Um, and I understand every nation's ability to self-govern and choose for themselves. But when they have territory and boundaries that come up against other people's territory, it's really brutal to watch the kind of fight and that they have to go through in court, talking about traditional land and territory and stuff like that. And so we have friends who are Giksen that set up a cabin on their traditional territory and then a checkpoint so that the LNG trucks that were coming to do some of the, I forgot, what did they call it? They had like, it had to have a significant start or something like that to prove that it was worth it for them to keep going. So they had to go through Giksen territory, or they were choosing to try to go through Giksen territory on a Forest Service road in order to get to the Niska. And these guys were like, no, you can't do that. This is our territory. This is shared territory or area that you're encroaching now. And then, you can't be coming over this way. So I went out and brought food to the people that were out on the land. So that's not my territory, right? So I don't have a say about what happens to it, but I can go and support. And we've talked about this before, right? Land defending doesn't mean you have to be always the one that's always on the front line, but you can help support. And I just remember sitting there thinking, like, what the heck can I do? And this is like October, November, December, and inland, it's like 30 below, right? And they have elders at this checkpoint because this is their territory. So we're bringing out groceries, bringing out what we can, spending time with them out on the land and sitting with them and being in community with them. And then bringing my kids out so that they could see and they know about why is there a farm out there? Why is, there a cabin out there? Why is there a checkpoint out there? And for them to get to meet some of the elders that are out there too. I know that was like a zillion different 20 million stories in one story, but yeah, it is what it is, right? And when we live in an area that's like it's a hot spot, so it was like a meeting place of many different nations, and many different nations have called on me to come and help to do the work, and the people that I'm connected, to. So
Thanks, Symbia. Yeah.
Symbia said something that I think is really important, and it's been the center of a discussion this week just because there have been so many protests here in the US around what's happening with immigration and immigration customs enforcement. But it is really important for people to understand what their role is, right? What do they have to offer? What do they bring to the table? That not everyone has the capability to be on a front line. But I also do think that it is very important, right, for people who carry privilege in societies that are founded in white supremacy to use their bodies, because the reaction to the use of their body on a front line is different than the reaction to the use of the body of brown and black people, right? Brown and black bodies are disposable in white supremacist cultures. White bodies are seen differently. And so I think, like, for me, I don't frontline in my city. I legal, right? All of my nibblings, my nieces, my nephews, the young folks in my life, they frontline. We have group chats. I have a responsibility because I have a law degree. I do no one any good if I am in jail alongside of them. I serve all kinds of purposes. When I'm out, I can find folks, I can figure out how to post bail, I can go to arraignments, right? And my father's also an attorney. And so as long as I've been practicing, if there's an action here in town, we are available as free legal counsel for anyone who gets arrested. It's part of our standard practice. But I do think it is important, right, for people who are, who are not Black and brown folks, right, to understand the importance of using their bodies in those situations, right? I just watched this video about this woman in Chicago who had her iced latte and sat down in front of an ice truck and was like, you guys aren't going to do your job today. And every time they would tell her to move, she would get up and then she would sit down again. And they were unable, for however the car was parked, to be able to get out of there, right? if that had been a Black or a brown body, the way that we would have seen forceful removal of that person would have been totally different, right? The way that violence and militarization would have escalated that on a Black and brown body is totally different. And I thought it was fantastic. She's just sitting there with her oat milk latte, like doing her part, right? Doing what she could do in that moment.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really important I'm trying to be mindful of time, but I also, there were some things that I really wanted to talk about. And I really wanted to talk about land back as praxis, not as theory,
Mhm.
right? When we talk about land back, it's not an academic like position. It's not something that people need to write papers on. It literally means give the land back, right? It's that simple. Give the land back. And so I think when we are talking about those kinds of things, what does it look like to be a frontliner? What does it look like to defend? What does it look like to show up in spaces as settlers, right? As settlers, whether we are colonialists and we are the descendants of colonizers, or we are settlers who came here through a different route. And even if folks, in my mind, everyone who is not Indigenous is a settler in some way or another. And so creating that relationship and that understanding with yourself about how your people came here, what that experience was like, and also if what you want to do is choose to stay here, then how are you participating in being an active part to returning the land to the original stewards of the land so that we can have a breadth of hope for the future? And how are you standing up in the face of white supremacist policies and ideologies that run our governments? And so I think that that was really important what you said, right? That everybody plays a different part. Everybody has a role to play. Being able to being aware of that, right, is really, I also feel like as in someone who's 42 years old, it's not my job necessarily to be a voice. The privilege of the young folks to tell us what is important to them. Where direction do we need to be moving in? One of my favorite things to ask folks is, who are your youth mentors? Who are the young people in your life that are holding you accountable to the future that you don't even get to be a part of?
Mm.
Right? It doesn't, what I think is important is way less important than what my nieces and nephews and my nibblings tell me is important to them. Because I will go, hopefully, much sooner than they go, and they will outlive me much longer. And if I can show them that leadership comes from them and it's our job to support, then hopefully they can do that when they reach this big age. And so I think that that is also a really big part of what's your role? Where do you stand? And getting back to the question that does talk about land back, right? What does that look like in practice? What does it mean when you're doing that and you're supporting that every day? Because I think there's a lot of things in internet culture, right? In social media culture that look cool to say, or they sound cool, or even people will know, like they'll understand fundamentally, yeah, my people came here, in whatever way they came here, we settled here, the land belongs to these other people. Understanding it and actually taking action to support that and to support the communities that you're settled on, right, are two very different things.
Fantastic. I have been furiously writing notes because Cynthia, when you started talking, I was like, oh, okay, like that's a good point. I want to talk about that. And then everybody's been talking. I was like, I gotta take notes. Well, I'm not gonna remember. I gotta take notes. Um, and so I'm gonna jump over one of the questions that we have on our list to come into the land back conversation because it's something I really want to talk about. But coming back for a sec to Symbia, what you were talking about, for myself and for a lot of folks who are like in this work where they're right now, there's many times throughout history, but right now feels like a really discouraging time in doing this work and a really overwhelming time. And I've talked about like with everybody, I was like, oh, I could just move away. Right? I could just move away and live in a hut on a beach and, not have to worry about doing this work. And then, my life would be so much easier. And then I don't know, I can't remember if it was you who I was saying this with, and it was like, yeah, but then I would get there and I'd be like, okay, what's here that needs help? And, so much of that is that claiming, that work claiming us, right? And it was really heartening that you put that in perspective with the work that your dad has been doing and just how long it took for him to see that. And like shitty that it took that long. And at the same time, like, doing like, and we've talked about this before, and having that conscious of like dismantling racism in our lifetime. Like I understand this, but it would be wonderful to get like a little bit of progress or, like this kind of thing. And so thank you for sharing that and just having that anchor point of like, yes, things are, and then you had also mentioned about like the quick and dirty of being brought into this work. And I think, and we talk a lot about this MR too, about like the perfectionism and how perfectionism is that tenet of white supremacy, and it'll keep us frozen from getting into this work and doing this because there's that feeling of like I need to do it perfectly. And so much of this work is just showing up and being willing to be taught and being willing to make a mistake and being willing to repair if a mistake makes it happens, right? And so that idea of the quick and dirty and really just for everybody who wants to do this work and get into this and to be an accomplice, like it is quick and dirty. Like none of us are like experts or anything. We're all relationship making, and there's not it's gonna come with that with them, and that we have to show up to be able to be claimed. And we have an increasing epidemic of loneliness, of feeling disconnected, and it's by design. And in doing work with Mar, and we've just gone through an evaluation process of like our programs and everything, and resounding theme is that people want to connect. They want to have community. They want to have a sense of belonging, but they're not necessarily showing up. And so, just in what you were saying, like in that being claimed, in my heart had that feeling of I want to be claimed. I want to be claimed by you. I want to be claimed by community. I have to show up to have that opportunity to be claimed, right? It's like the winning the lotto. You're not going to win if you don't buy a ticket, right? You gotta get in there. Um, and then the last thing, just with what Esteli was saying about roles, our roles grow, right? I think that there is that panic when we're maybe visually kind of on the outside and we're trying to get into this work and we want to support and we don't know where we should go. We don't know what to do when we're feeling like, roles grow, right? So, like, maybe if your role is starting with delivering sandwiches and groceries and that's how you're showing up, maybe then as you're learning and you're doing that quick and dirty and you're getting that understanding and you're building those relationships, more and more opportunities for you to do this work deeper are going to present themselves. And then it's that active showing up, right? So you have to like be like, all right, I'm in and I'm like doing all of this, right? I'm a world-class speaker now or whatever it is. Like, no, it's going to be met every step of the way with an opportunity for you to stretch yourself. And we say anti-racism work is healing work because there's so much personal work and personal healing that is the benefit of doing this work, that you will continuously have the opportunity to grow and to increase your impact. Okay, I went through all my notes.
Can I build off of what you just sharing?
Yes.
I know that Nuskmata is not here, and I don't want to speak for her, and the work that she's doing, but I would like to speak as an observer to some of the work and kind of just to build off the thought you were just saying. Nuskmata showed up in my life last year when we did the Sacred Fire. Right. So when they did the fire, she was connected to somebody who's Gixan. And because the Gixan were doing the opening for the All Native basketball tournament, they were the ones that asked permission originally is it okay if we do this opening on your territory? Is it okay if we do a sacred fire? This is a part of our tradition. I was the one that brought them together. And then so Newhawk and I can't remember the other nation that she's from. But she, both of her are Indigenous. But yeah, she was connected to somebody who was Gixen, and she ended up coming with the group that did the opening, and she was singing, and I to meet her through the firekeeper's uncle, right? The firekeeper's uncle was the one that invited her, and she ended up coming and drumming and singing with their group. And the firekeeper's uncle, so the firekeeper is how I'm connected to all of those guys, right? And she ended up coming down to the fire, singing and drumming with us, and then telling us about the house opening that they were doing, right? And, like, I don't know how much I want to talk about her stuff because I really wanted her to be here to talk about it. And I don't want to speak on her behalf, but the point is, she came and sat with us in community. We fed her. We fed anybody who came and sat with us in community. We put the call out, the community put food, water, snacks, and we gave it right back out to the people. We called out for firewood. People dropped firewood off. We kept that fire going. We had harvested cedar. We did cedar brushing. We did smudging. The whole. Then we sat in community together with her. And then she said, I'm doing a house opening, probably in the fall at some point in my territory. When it comes time, I would love if you came to witness it, because she's there witnessing our work, right? And then we said, of course, you just keep us in the loop, and, we'll keep that in mind about when we start to go do the work, right? And we ended up going to Haida Gwaii and witnessing work that they were doing. They launched a canoe, a 55-foot canoe, a dugout canoe. It was freaking gorgeous. We went and witnessed the work that they were doing there. And then we got the notice that Nuskmata was going to do the house opening. So they had built it on their own territory, on an old village site, and to watch in awe of the work that they did. They were finding that there was a housing shortage, and it was through COVID, and they were just like, where can we even live? We want to be in community. And then they went to their hereditary and their band leadership and asked blessing and permission to build on that site. So they started to do that construction. There was a handful of things that precipitated that, but they ended up building on that site. And now it's, how many years later, 4 years later, because it was last year when they did the house opening. And then the province got wind that they were doing this on this site. And then they gave them a trespass notice and told them that they had to vacate this and gave them a 120-day notice and told them that they had to leave. And they cited it as that it was a cultural or protected heritage site. And when we sat there, and like I said, I don't want to speak for her and all of the work that they've done, but as a witness to the work that they did, Gerald is one of the guys from here. He's the son of the matriarch. We agreed to go. We had tried to ask our crew of people that did the work or were at the Sacred Fire, and we were the two that were able to make it. We made the journey there and watched them do this house opening. And when we were there, they had one of their knowledge keepers. He's a young man who knows the language, has studied, songs, stories, legends, speaks the language, sat there and told us their origin story, that they just descended off. I don't give it the same justice as obviously that this man does, but what my understanding was, right, that their stories that they descended off the eyelashes of the sun. And then they talked about, who held the name from that time, and then who held the name next, and who held the name next, and what was tied to the land, and then now how they hold those names that is tied to the land. And I was like, how can the province sit there and say that they have to leave when they can talk about the origins of their people and how they descended there and how those names were passed to who, and they can account for who held those names before them and how it was connected to that land. Yeah. So when you're talking about, showing up, we came out of pocket. We went and traveled there, it was 16 hours or something like that from where we are. And I tell this story to everybody all the time. I don't know if you've ever heard of the hill, they call it, to get down to Bella Coola. It was told to me, oh, it's epic. That's all it was told to me. And Yeah, I was like this the entire time, and it's like 45-degree angle, and I won't tell you more than that, but it was it down there, and it was beautiful people, beautiful land. You're surrounded by mountains. She's on the land, right? So that's why we said if she's not here, we understand that there's lots of work that she's doing. She's got her grandbaby and her son and the son's wife that are there and doing the amazing work. But we, we could have said no and not taken that opportunity, but we did. We said yes. And we went and witnessed that work and we got to sit alongside. And then I got invited to come to their film festival and show our documentary in the film festival. So then I got to go again to witness the work that she's doing, talking about land defending and about the issues that are all intertwined together from land defending and child welfare and about police brutality on Indigenous bodies, and ended up watching Yinta. I don't know if any of you guys saw that that's out, right? She's the people, they're actually, Nuskmata is actually in the film, just very briefly in the side as just one of the bystanders kind of in there, but they were on the sites that are there. The partner that she was with is Gixan, and Gixan and Wet'suwet'en are side by side neighboring. So we ended up watching that. We got to watch one on Mauna Kea, which was so powerful. I cried through that whole entire movie. We watched Sugarcane because she's also some of her family's from Williams Lake, and there's family members of hers that were in that. We watched Tea Creek. I don't know if any of you guys have watched Tea Creek, but dang, if you haven't watched it, go find it when it comes out into your community. You have to wait till it comes out. Keep an eye out, but they're Gixan and on Gixan territory, but Tsimshian and Gixan, I guess, and they had a goal of being able to be food producers for this area, this region, instead of always bringing in food from the Lower Mainland, from the Okanagan, because that's how we get our right. There's no other farms or anything like that, and they started to apply for grants so that they could do teaching like construction worker, chef, or like camp cook and stuff like that, and they'd like farm equipment training so people learn how to do that, like all the different things that you could do to run a farm. They started doing short-term certificate training in order to help the people to build capacity in their community, and they did a whole documentary on it, and it's absolutely beautiful. So we got to watch that, and we got to watch our documentary. We got to watch Saints and Warriors. If you haven't heard about that, it's pretty kick-ass too. It's about the all-native basketball tournament and the Haida people, which is pretty cool. All and how cool it is, and what kind of culture it is around here, around resistance against colonization, and how you think how basketball and resistance come together, but they do in our area, right? Like it, yeah, and how that all native basketball tournament even came together in the first place was because they had bans on people coming together. They had, bans on us being able to put money towards lawyers to be able to come together to form political parties and all of those things. And this was like the only way they could talk about land claims or about what was going on. As if anybody, they said it was like more than 2 or 3 Indigenous people came together, that was kind of like what they were prohibited, right? So this was the only way that they can come together. It was through the guise of sports. And it was the way that they could stay being able to share and exchange culture, because there's a potlatch ban that was before that. There's you come together to where you couldn't be wearing regalia, you couldn't be gift giving. There's like so many things that were banned, or any way that we were practicing culture, our governance structure. There was things that prohibited those things, right? So then, yeah, that documentary is pretty to be able to talk about the resistance and how it's connected to basketball. That's really cool. But yeah, that's like a zillion, like I said, another zillion things, but it was to add to Carrie's, like, we can watch from the sidelines and be like, oh, this is so cool. Like, look at all these like amazing people. And, you think, like Carrie said, you become like, I remember hearing Lizzo say this one time, and she was like, it took her like the 10 years for her 10 cents of fame, like her overnight success, right?
Mhm.
Everyone thought she's this overnight success, and she's like, I've been doing this for 10 years. This isn't an overnight success, but this is what it looks like to the public. And it's very similar here. Like, every time you just have to say yes, or this is it. being brought into the work and being in a relationship. That's what it is. Like Carrie said, you can't work because of credentials. Like I've had so many people in the last little bit are like, when are you going to get your master's? I'm like, I don't have my bachelor's degree right now. Like I went and did my LPN. I went 3 years into a bachelor's of science in nursing, and then had my last two babies, my fifth and sixth baby back to back. And I just didn't go back to school, and then we had trauma happen. And I was like, this is just not happening, and then stronger and do I feel. I'm going to try not to swear. I had to censor myself for a second. But I'm a community researcher, and I work alongside people in so many universities across Canada, in the States, and we've got an international project that I'm on, and I'm still firmly planted in. I am not going to go back. Like, and maybe there's like a 1% chance, but in this moment, I'm like, not 1 ounce of my money is going to go back into an institution, and like I paid off my student loan probably like 2 years ago going into nursing. I live in a rural, remote area. If I had had my wits with me, I probably could have got some of it forgiven, but it just didn't happen. Right. And I look at, I could be teaching this stuff. They can't teach me this stuff. I'm learning it from the elders, from the youth, from the people who are on the ground doing the work. My dad talks about this sometimes. He's like, I have like 8th grade, 10th grade education. You know, that's the furthest in his family that anybody had ever gone. Everybody else had like 2nd grade or 3rd grade through residential school or day school, and he worked in the fish plant, that was, and then he became a union person, and then he became political through the Council of Haida Nation. Has been his education, right? And my mom's gone back to school, and then did her bachelor's of social work, and she's kind of the one in my ears now. She's like, we could help you with your master's project. But like, how have I not already done like 3 master's theses by the work that I've done? How could I already not, tell you word for word how, I've had to teach what laws, natural law, ancestral matriarchal law, master carver's law, natural law. All of those things are what governs us. Talking about the governance system of Indigenous people, and then trying to do this work alongside Carrie and the work that we're doing with Mar. That's another master's thesis right there about, sprouting this, and what did we have to do to make sure that people had capacity, and that we're not burning everybody out, and then we're not, having lateral violence happen, and we're not having, all the emotional labor happening for the brown and black people, or people in a group, and the pole raising, and then the sacred fire, and then now the work that we're doing with bringing poles down because of how they were raised, these specific ones, right? So yeah, you learn this in a book. You can't learn this in university. You can't sit in a particular space theorizing all you want. And when Carrie was talking about the healing, it brought me this picture of my grandmother. I sat with this one person, and I was doing a one-to-one with this person. And, all my sessions when I do one-to-ones with people are confidential. But she said it was okay to share this one part. And it's usually only when it's a universal message and that they give me permission, is it okay to share. And I don't tell identifying information. I just share a little bit about what was seen in it. But I sat in front of her, and we were talking away about a bunch of different things. And then I started closing my eyes because I felt drawn into like this scene that was playing out in my mind's eye. And it was her grandmother and my grandmother, as if they were like 23, 25. And I could see my mother, or my grandmother, and what I imagined her to have looked like when she was that age, right? And I see her, she's dressed in like a shirt almost similar to what I'm wearing right now, but is white. And then she's got this white skirt on, and she's kind of hunched over. My ended up with breast cancer and had her mastectomy. So I remember her kind of sitting like this a lot of the time. But I could see her curly hair, and then see the other woman. She was a woman of color, and I could see her, and it was like they're on this stoop together. And I was like, why would our grandmothers be together? This is such a very like powerful image. And then I see my grandmother get up and start screaming, and she's pointing over in the distance, and she's screaming, "You don't have permission to be here. You need to leave now. You don't belong here. You're not going to touch any of them. You need to leave now." And she was like a lioness roar across to whoever. And I looked over, and it's like priests and nuns and other people that were coming to take babes. And I could feel this just like energy coming, like pulsing through my body, and then also pulsing this lady's body. And I'm just crying, and she's looking at me like, what is happening? This lady is just like in this, and I'm just crying. And then I'll give me a second, and then I start trying to describe to her what her grandmother looks like, and what I can see her to look like, and what my grandmother looks like, and what's happening in this. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with anything with Reiki at all. It's so random to say that on the side of this, but they have attunements, right? So they do a tone, they have specific teachings that they teach, and then it means that you've attuned to that frequency or that energy. And when I was sitting there, and that just primal speaking of authority that my grandmother was doing in this vision felt like an attunement. And then she sat, and she's like, now this energy sits with you. No children are going to be taken from you or anybody else around you again. That's the energy you're carrying now. This is the medicine, basically the medicine that the two of them were collectively coming together to give the gift to us. And so when you're talking about, you know, bloodlines, and we're talking about the work, and we're talking about coming into it, and about the healing, that's what it felt like this. My grandmother's long passed away, right? She passed away like 24 years ago. Or 23 years ago, she passed away right after I had Kyla, my oldest one. And she never got to meet any of my grandbabe or my babes, any of her great grandbabes, nothing. And she had my mom taken from her. She had kids taken away from her, right? And my mom had my brother taken away from her, and then I had my kids taken away from me. So to sit there and to do that one-to-one with this lady who was also at risk of having her kid taken, through stuff that was happening, and I could just feel the wrath, coming. And I feel like the work that we're doing here, that's part of it, and I've shared it before too. I'm gonna try not to bawl my eyes out. Oh. The ones that have watched the documentary already, that's one of the things that, that I said in it was like right before the night before my kids were given back to me, I was praying about it because I didn't know what was going to happen, right? They were removed from my care following trauma. I had my life threatened, and my ex-husband threatened to kill me, and then three of our kids walked in when it happened. And this is a whole long story. Watch the documentary. You'll see the whole thing. But I didn't know that the kids were going to come back to me. I only knew that we had court, and there at no point did they indicate that they were going to give the kids back or anything like that. And I went to court, and then I prayed about it the night before, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is almost 6 months of this, trying to go back, and there's disappointment and hopes up, disappointment, and all these layers of healing that I'm going through, as I'm trying to get my kids back. And I prayed about it, and I could hear those words of wisdom transform this for them, so that it never happens again to them, and then it never happens to other kids. And when I went to go see Nuskmata a couple weeks ago, and we watched the documentary, she has this young lady that she works with who's such a beautiful girl. And, she came and sat by me while the film was on, and I've got little tears coming down. And I think she thought she was coming to sit to support me. And I'm crying through the last little part of it because it's really hard to watch and witness again. Nuskmata is standing behind me and holding my shoulders while we're watching this and witnessing it with everybody else that was there. And then there's a certain part that comes on, and she just starts bawling, this young girl, right? And then I got this note from her. I to really, see her too much after I left, or after we left watching the documentaries. And she wrote me this letter, and she was just like, what a beautiful film. And I saw myself in it. And there was things that were brought to me in it I don't think I was ready for. And also that brought healing and belonging. And, one of the things that she said, she was like, we're going to transform this for them. And it just was like, so I think everything that we've talked about together today, yeah. And I was sharing with Carrie, because Carrie was like trying to find out how did we all know each other, right? And I was talking to my mom before we came on. I was like, they all know me. I was like, Carrie and I have worked together for the last 5 years. I came on 6 months into MAR, and we've kind of walked alongside each other with some, harebrained ideas all the time, and doing the work alongside each other. And then I met Esteli around, I want to say close to around the same time, or maybe a little bit before then. We follow a similar person online, and then we ended up in a Zoom chat very similar to this one. And then she said that she knew the second I came on, I had a t-shirt, or my sweater that said land back. And then I had my big red copper canoe woman earrings. And she was like, I knew the second you came on that we were going to be best friends. And then with Nuskmata, like I said, met her through the Sacred Fire. And then it was funny because Nuskmata was going to New Mexico last year in May, I think it was. And she's like, oh, we should go to New Mexico. And I was like, that would be so amazing. Then I just couldn't get my passport stuff together at the time. But I was like, I have a buddy who's actually in Albuquerque. I should, I'll give you her number. And they ended up meeting and hanging out. And then I got this phone call from her. She's like, how come you didn't tell me that you haven't met her in person yet? And I was like, but I've known her for like the last 5 years, and we've done all this work together, and she supports the work I'm doing, and I was supporting her work she's doing. And so it was really cool that they got to, and they were sending me pictures of them together, and they went to like a Brooks and Dunn concert together, and they went out on the land together, and it was really cool. And then I got to go and meet Esteli in person in November. We went, and there was a tattoo and music festival that they had, and we went out, and I prayed over the land that we were on and asked permission to be there first, and then I prayed over, and it was a very healing experience for everybody that was there. And then we have talks about being able to show our documentary there, and then all that stuff happened with Trump, and there's probably, I don't know if that will how safe it would ever be for me to go. But we talk about it, about being able to show the documentary because of the work that she does. And I actually got her connected with one of the guys that I work with through Johns Hopkins University through a research project. And they actually both live in the same community. And they're like, wait a minute. So we got to meet all together when I was there. They got to meet, and now they get to work together. And one of my colleagues is becoming a foster parent and connected to the work that Esteli's doing. So when Carrie's talking about that, that's what it is. It's about trial and error, quick and dirty. There is no way you can go to school to learn any of these things. It is about being in relationship with and doing your best and standing to be corrected. I've been corrected probably over 1,000 times, and some pretty harsh corrections in the last little bit. Sometimes it's loving, and sometimes it's a lot. I had a whole week of trying to do a repair over an article that came out that nobody interviewed me. They watched a video and they took quotes from it and wrote it, and it was so harmful, and had to do damage control and repair harm that was caused by not even something I did, but because something from words that I had shared, taken out of context. And when it came time for the totem pole that we raised, looking at whose territory it actually is, and did we get permission from the right people, and if we didn't, who were in it? Was lots of learning, lots of humility, lots of walking and sitting with elders, with chiefs, with matriarchs, with the helpers, the healers, the birth workers, the land defenders, to say, how do we do this? There's nothing that shows me how to do this other than just doing it and trying to do it with causing the least amount of harm and showing the most amount of respect.
I'm sitting here just like so grateful for our time together and this conversation and what you shared and what Celia shared. Um, guess how many questions we got through? And one question. Um, And our other questions are like really, really great questions. And I'm a little bit sad, a little remiss that we didn't get to really dig into our question around land back, and what that means. And so I think what I'd like to do is check in with you and Esteli and Nuskmata if we can find some time and maybe not necessarily have it as a live thing, but maybe we can have a conversation and record it and share it out with everybody who registered, and we can have a part two to this because I feel everything that needed to was said, but there's always so much to be said. Mm. And so we have a podcast.
We were joking about it before everybody came on, Glenda. I was like, this is like so exciting for our four voices to come together. And I was just like, this is The View, but like a zillion times better. And then we're like a zillion times better. And then we're like, that's exactly what we're talking about. These are, work in all these different, corners, all different types of work, all different professional backgrounds. And yeah, I think I'm going to try not to cry again, but I feel so blessed to know these amazing human beings. So blessed to call them my sisters. So blessed to know their babies and their grandbabies. And so blessed to call on them, right? Call on them at 3 o'clock in the morning, answering texts to each other and about crying and holding space for and being real with. And yeah, I definitely think that we need a part two, and I definitely think that it's to be continued. And I think that I think it's funny because the people that are on here that don't know this, that I've been bugging Carrie for probably the last year about doing a podcast, and I keep bringing it up anytime or any chance I get. So I told her, and once she was like, well, what would I said, all we have to do is press record. And I said, people would listen. I was like, we have stories. And, I was like, from the people that we know, from the work that we're doing, from just current events, from all of those things. And there's so much wisdom in the lived experiences that we have and walking alongside the people that we do. But yeah, I can't. That's why I was trying to hold back my tears earlier. Just as soon as Esteli started talking and you started introducing, I was just like, everyone's so amazing in the work that they're doing, and that we're collectively all together and sitting together. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you. I know for me, just like you say, being in this presence and this is just having these conversations and showing up, and it's healing. And for everybody who is here, maybe something has stirred in you in participating in this conversation or watching the recording later. And it could be a range of things from maybe feeling grief or connection, or deeper sense of purpose. Hopefully, though, that responsibility to act and that desire to act and to get connected. And really that's the power of truth telling and revolutionary mothering, which we just briefly touched on for the whole topic of the conversation. And for me, I mean, I have a few more minutes. Symbia, I know that you have a lot on the go today, but I would, if you have time, would love to open it up to everybody who's been with us today. If there's a comment or a question that's been on your mind or on your heart that you want to share. But if you have to go, because we're at time, I just want to say thank you for spending your time with us, and for showing up with that humility and that openness and that respect to be able to take in what was shared. And so I will send the recording out ASAP, and we'll keep all of you in mind for when we do the part two to send out that recording too. So does anybody have anything that they wanted to share or to ask? And you feel free to put it in the chat. I'm happy to read it out for you, or to raise a virtual hand and ask a question. Yes, thanks for being here. I was so touched about the comment, "The land and the children chose us." I would love to hear more. How do you, and this was kind of one of the questions that we had around, revolutionary mothering too, and what that means. When we talk about the land and the children choosing us, what does that mean to you?
Can I share that? I could answer this already, but just not explicitly, right? Revolutionary mothering to me was our documentary. Revolutionary mothering to me is bringing my kids to the front lines. Revolutionary mothering to me is having my kids with me and being in their lives, right? If you look at that history of colonization and normalizing the apprehension of our children and removal of our children from our families, the work that I'm doing is revolutionary in our bloodline to say that's enough and to speak to it, right? And the work that I'm doing in my Indigenous practice advisor role, I'm doing that on a provincial level now. The work that I do with the research that I do on a provincial level, on an international level, on a federal level, that is talking about health equity, teaching my children about our governance structure as best as I can, teaching them about how to conduct themselves in a feast hall, how to show up in these spaces. Those are all parts of that revolutionary mothering, right? Teaching them about their cousins in Victoria and their cousins in Albuquerque, and getting to see each other. That's huge, that they know that they have connection outside of just their bloodline that's just in this space, right? We went and spent time over at Carrie's house, and my girls got to visit with her kids. And when we showed the documentary in Victoria, I brought some of my girls with me then. And when I went and showed the documentary with the University of Manitoba and to their children's hospital, I told them, I said, the only way that you're going to get me here is if you're going to pay for two of my children to come with me. That's the reality. And when you look on a health equity, on an equity level, in order for you to get the wisdom, insight, revelation from me, who has this unique lived experience, you need to make sure that you're accommodating my children coming with me, because I'm a single mom. So making sure that there's accommodations like that are made for me and the way that I mother and share and connect with my children is really important. So them participating, watching the documentary, watching other people watch the documentary, and helping out, give out medicine bundles when we were there, and just witnessing the work is also part of that revolutionary mothering, and caring for them so that I'm not transferring that trauma, but teaching them tools as how we stop it from happening to them, and then also for other kids, right? So and then being out on the land with them, being out at the lake when I can, and trying to get myself out of my own bubble sometimes and being present with them. That's still a work in progress. Being overstimulated and being somebody who's neurodivergent. And I think my special interest is activism. And it's to get out of that mode and to be just present. I went and had dinner with Kristen last night, and I was like, put your phone down. That doesn't exist. Just what she has to say. And healing pieces of myself, because my mom was distracted. My mom, came from trauma. And, like, I love my mother. And I've also described it about being raised by a tornado or raised by a wolverine. She's an amazing human being. And she's had a lot of healing that she's done. And she's come from so much harm and out on her own from a very young age, and taken away from family and had her babe taken away, and every trauma that you could probably put on this lady she's lived through: poverty, incest, rape, everything. And to turn around and tell my children I love you and to permit them to hug me is revolutionary sometimes because of the way that I was raised. And being gentle with them and not spanking and not punishing and choosing to correct and choosing to do my best to connect is still actively my room for growth and where I challenge myself. And that's revolutionary for me because of where I came from and where my mom came from.
And I think for me, okay, I echo everything that you say, and it's that with the idea of, the land choosing us, all of us, and our children choosing us, it is an undoing of the understanding of that ownership and that colonial mindset that we somehow own children and we somehow own the land and that they are possessions of ours to decide with what we will, as if there is no inherent value to children and to the land, or that I can't think of the word, but like their own beingness, right? And so my children are lent to me. It is a gift and a privilege that I get to be their parent. Some days does not feel that way. Please do not. I
Yeah.
am no saint or like, I'm not a perfect mom, but in that revolutionary mothering part too is that unlearning that, right? Because we have been socialized into this parenting structure and into this ownership or dominion over structure with land. And what's revolutionary about that is unlearning that so that it is that we can be in relationship, in honoring that relationship. So I think the land and our children, they choose us in different ways. And in their choosing, they are calling us, they're calling us home to ourselves. They are calling us to shed all of that conditioning. They're calling us to become our favorite versions of ourselves. They're calling us to do better. And it's just whether we can hear that call and whether we choose to heed that call.
Yeah. As you're talking, things are coming up too for me that they're reminding me of my innocence that was lost a zillion years ago in amongst so many things, bringing purpose and so much power, so much power. My one girl, I remember her telling me after my ex-husband and I split, and I've always been heavy set, always, even as a kid. I'm like 6 feet tall and about 300 pounds or a little over 300 pounds on a regular. And my girl saying that there's beauty in all bodies and that I'll be somebody's flavor at some point. And I was just like, huh, I love that. And, like she taught me a lot about, you know, body neutrality, positivity at one point, and just about being in my body because what was modeled to me and what was reflected back through, popular culture. The other piece I was going to say too that really strikes me in thinking about that revolutionary mothering is being able to reclaim our tribe, and that might sound kind of whatever, but I think about, and please take this the way that I mean it, Carrie, but being able to have each other, like that there's mothering that's happening. We're teaching each other how to reparent ourselves, and we're standing alongside each other. And there's things that, when we're in your home, I was like, this is how I want to be. This is what I wish that I could model with my children. And obviously, I'm not going to do compare. We're in totally different places. There's totally different things that I remember sitting there and thinking, for me as an autistic person, a lot of the time I need scripts. I need something to have been in order for me to understand. I can't always imagine, about things. And I understand the rules of gentle parenting, but does that mean I understand how it plays out all the time? And when you're a parent, like I said, I love my mom dearly. And when you're parented by a tornado, through only that lens of trauma for those formative years, obviously she's done so much healing to come out of it. And there's a lot of like, I know I just don't want to do that because it was so harmful and hurtful. And I don't like how I felt. I don't like how I still feel sometimes when I feel this against that relationship with my mom. And I've, seen and witnessed you in spaces with your children and with other humans that we have in our space, and you professionally, in the way that you've shown up and how you've been open and honest with your healing and your reparenting of yourself has given me so much hope, example, space being held. And when I say it means so much to me to be able to sit with, the people that we have sat with, it means something to me because everybody's given me something that I'm like, this is our tribe, this is our people coming together where our moms didn't necessarily have that. And then my grandmothers, before my grandmothers, they did have community. They were on the land. They were people connected to their own territory, but being displaced and not having that. I've shared that with Carrie before. It feels like orphan energy, being in a totally different territory. My children are bloodline here, but I'm not, right? So that sense of belonging that you were talking about before, I feel like that, it's developed because of the work that we've done. And the work that we've done through Mars, given me words, helped me to reclaim my voice. Before I was like yelling into the void, and now I've got ways to describe what's actually happening. And I've been able to turn around and teach others on how to describe what it is happening. And, that is revolutionary mothering, that, all of that. So, like, I know that you're only a couple of years older. I'm not going to say big or older sister, little big
It's
sister.
so male like that. You mean.
Only a few, only a few. Well, I know. I think Esteli and I are like 1 year. I think we're 1 year off. I think I'm 1 year older than she is. But yeah, like we're all, and then Nuskmata is like, I think just turning 50 or something like that, around that. So we're close in age, I think. Yeah. But yeah, like being able to look to each other because that wasn't in front of us. And no shame, no shade, to the women that came before us. They did the best.
Mhm.
And but it doesn't mean that isn't how it was received and the
Mhm.
impact that it made and the legacy that was left that we get to pick up, and we can say, hey, I don't want this. And
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I love you. I
Love
love
you
you. I
too.
love all the ladies that are here, or all the people that showed up today too. Like there's pieces of this that we're all claiming of that reparenting. That is
Mhm.
revolutionary mothering. We've had to because of the mess that we're collectively in and trying to find our people. So yeah.
And on that too, I've been thinking about that where for certain types of people like us, and probably the folks who are choosing to be here in this space and who are choosing to watch the recording, friendship in place may not it's not a necessarily reality for me, right? And so it's that friendship in 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 values and connection and having it's more work. It's more work. But the relationships are so rewarding. And I'm really thankful for you in our friendship over the last couple of years too, because you have definitely helped me level up too, helped me grow. Um, and I just, I think I just want that for everybody. I want that for everybody. And it's something that you had said earlier about how, like, the government had legislated the not being together, the not gathering. And the government would never be able to legislate white folks not gathering.
Yep.
But what we can do is we can erode sense of self, and we can
Yep.
erode communities, and we can, through a pandemic,
Yep.
erode skills to be able to people and gather. And so, effectively where we're sitting is at a time and space where we have been conditioned to choose isolation. And it makes me really sad, and I just really want everybody to be able to have a person like you are my person and I am your person, and that's part of what I do. Thank you, everybody. Big
For
hugs.
those who choose to receive it.
Pardon?
I said big hugs to those who choose to receive it. Yes, I'm thankful that we got together, and we do need a part two.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. It'll be episode number 1. Just kidding.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you.
How for being here. Thank you. Bye, guys.